All right. Might as well start. Yeah.
So, I remember the Rav was trying to bring examples of how Hashem solves, or the presence or the existence of Hashem solves certain philosophical problems. One you mentioned was the representations sort of that we create by writing and all the problems that can bring up, which can be resolved if you understand that they exist also in a mind. So coming out of that, can we say that all reality is information or part of a mind? Like, is that a conclusion we can kind of draw out that makes sense, or is it not less than a mind? Like, it's one substance, but it's like one super substance of like higher mind, which we have a small piece of.
Okay, this is a big question, and I'm not able to answer it in any detail. But you're putting things together in a reasonable way. Let me explain that when I was quoting the Alvin Plantinga's 2,000 or so arguments for the existence of God, he didn't say that assuming God solves the problem. What he said was, without God, the problem looks hopeless, and with God, there's something to work on. Because the door is open to seemingly to make progress. And there we're talking about the meaningfulness of language, and in particular the ability of language to refer to something in the world, how marks or sounds somehow link to or pick out items in the world. And the thought is that people refer, we know what that means because we do it and we understand that we are doing it. And then pieces of the world, like scribbles on paper or patterns of sound, refer because they are the tools that people use to refer. But it's really minds that refer. Some people want to make that into a mystery also, but that's at least one way to make progress. And then, if you talk about reference without people thinking about it, if you have those ideas in God's mind, then God can refer, and that's what the reference is based on. That was the idea of not to solve the problem, but to show that there's a way to go forward in working the problem out. Now, it's not obvious that what goes on in minds is information. Worse than that, although the idea that everything is information is very popular, and it's like a mantra or a talisman by which you can somehow remake your picture of the world and escape all sorts of problems, I haven't seen anybody describe what information is. I look to great science writers like Philip Ball, who in his book on quantum mechanics ends his book with the thought that information will do it. I've seen an essay of his on information. I haven't a clue what they're talking about. What makes something information? So I think this is like, at best, suggestive of further work to be done. I wouldn't call it a solution. I don't know what the solution is saying. And then you have someone like John Searle who points out that information, a thing is information if it interacts with a mind in a particular way. That's what makes it information, other than making it square or magnetized or radioactive, which doesn't require minds at all. But a thing can't be information without a mind interacting with it in a particular way. Well, that makes it relative to minds. And it means the definition of information is not the thing is information. The definition is this thing interacts with minds in the information way. It's an interaction, not a thing. Well, that's, as a philosopher, I want to know what category the thing is in, so I want to know what it belongs to. And then you have to describe what kind of interaction it is. I didn't see anybody even hope to do that. So I think that, 2,300 years ago when Democritus proposed atoms, everything's made out of atoms, and they're different atoms, different shapes and different sizes, and so on. And everything that exists and does what it does because of the atoms of which it's composed. Okay, show me one. Show me 6. Show me how salt works. Show me how air works. I don't know, there are little things floating in the void, and that's what makes it work. that's nice to say, but you haven't got any reason to think it's true, and you haven't got any explanations whatsoever of individual cases. That's not a solution. Maybe the solution will lie there after thousands of years of work, but in the meantime, not a solution. But waving the information flag and saying, that's why contemplation works that way, that's how the origin works, because it's all information, without giving me some direct explanation of what information is, doesn't sound to me like a solution. I'm very frustrated by the people who just wave the information flag and say, that's the way I understand the world. I don't think they know what we're talking about.
What would be if ultimately God is unknowable, then what would be the purpose in trying to get to understand Him? Ultimately seeing Him.
Well, unknowable. That's, I think, too blanket a term. The Rambam, whose position we've been describing, says, also in Part 1, Chapter 54, that Moses asks God for two things. Show me your kavod. And the Rambam takes that as synonymous with make me know what your essence is. To which the answer Moses gets is, man cannot see me and live. In your present condition, it's impossible for you to know my essence. And a second request that Moses had, show me your ways. Show me your ways, which is the modes of your action. And the next word in the verse is, ve'edacha, and I shall know you. And that request God grants. He does show his ways. So it's a little bold to say we can't know God. If the pasuk says, and I shall know you, but I'm informed about your ways. So there is some aspect of God you can know, in some particular dimension. We talked about speaking about his actions, and that's a way of knowing him, says the verse. But of course, it isn't all of him, and it isn't the part that's the agent part, which is doing the actions. So there are things you do know, things you don't know. But it's not enough it's not quite right to say that as a total reality, there's zero information. In fact, there has been people who want to say that God is called Ein Sof. Ein Sof literally means without end, and that's a kind of expression to connote infinity. But they point out that it says there's no end. That doesn't imply there's no beginning. In fact, it seems to imply there is a beginning. And that's why you have to be told that even though there's a beginning, there's no end. Which again would indicate that there is a beginning to understanding him. It's just that you can't get to the end. So I wouldn't make a global statement that he's unknowable. It's too complete, too all-inclusive.
I was trying to work on what the Rambam was saying about the nature of contradiction being fixed. So I was thinking that when you have a human, and I know I came with this before, but I have a better way of imagining. So a human has a fixed variable aspect, which is that it must be one of two genders. If it can't be male or female, then we might even say that it's not human, or that it can't be human. So it has a variable, it must be that it's one of those two things, and it's built into the idea of human that it's variable. Now, something like contradiction instead would be that it has no variance. It's totally uniform, and so it can't have any of these different levers you can push on or that have to be locked in order to give rise to it in the world. And then I was thinking about the different kind of contradictions that could emerge. So for instance, a square circle, or maybe a contradiction like Joe is red, Joe is not red. I think you could pry out the pieces that give rise to the contradiction in either of those. Same way that you could say, well, a mother gave birth to a child, but then the mother's existence is not necessary for the child's existence. So you could peel away the things that make a contradiction happen, and then you have always the same thing of contradiction that shows up every time, and it's uniform, and part of its uniformity, of its fixed nature, is that it cannot be, that it cannot exist in the world.
Well, I think we need a Rashi and Tosfos on that. Rabbi explained what the words meant, and the Tosfos explained the logic. I don't think I'm getting a clear picture here. Let's take square circle. The reason it's a contradiction is because you are saying the very same thing is both square and circle. So it's not either or, and it's not a question of neither, it's a question of both. Both square and circle. Same thing.
But I'm wondering if the square circle is giving rise to the contradiction, but it's not, then the contradiction can kind of stand on its own as an idea of two things that are definitionally incompatible.
But that would be a general description of what a contradiction is, and square circle is an example of an actual contradiction. So I don't see any progress there. Now, it's sort of like if you have two things, like the two genders, which is, it's not a good example, but if you have a male and female, right? The way I would look at it is this: we have a balance scale, right? You say, well, if this side goes down, it's male. This side goes down, it's female. And if it's male and female, well then both sides have to go down. But then the scale breaks.
Yeah.
So if the scale is the logic that you use in describing the world, to say it's both male and female breaks the scale. That's kind of graphic picture of what a contradiction would do. Your means of weighing the world become broken. The idea of the fixed nature, the other fixed nature is that it's in the world. I made it linguistic. In the beginning of the 20th century, they had what they called the linguistic term, where everything was sort of graduated into language and focusing on how language works, which was useful for a while, and it led to real insights. The Rambam is not talking about the words; he's talking about the reality. And and having a fixed nature, if you know that God is the creator, so it's like, did he create that fixed nature? And if he did create that fixed nature, could he not, can he control it? Now, what does it mean to control it? Obliterate it? Sure, he can certainly obliterate it. But that wouldn't get you contradictions that are true. That would just wipe out the contradiction, right? So I don't know why, he doesn't explain why it is that things with this fixed nature, we don't ascribe God as having control over or ability to transform. But he said, and he says it in those words. It could be that this is a medieval doctrine with which I'm not familiar, or even ancient doctrine with which I'm not familiar. Maybe there is some explanation for it. I use the modern explanation because I understand it and I can communicate it easily. But I don't hear in what you're saying that we're sort of making any progress. Sorry, I give you credit when you say something that's good. And I don't hear it. I just don't hear it. Any explanation? Yeah.
I was reading a book that was describing. Apparently, the Rambam was saying you can't describe any positive attributes whatsoever.
I'm not getting the words. Slower and more clear. Rambam says what?
We can't describe any positive attributes to God because the issue would be that we'd say, if we say God's the most knowledgeable for creating, I didn't understand it.
The issue would be what?
That when we describe God as the most knowledgeable, we create a category as the most knowledgeable, and God's put in it.
Most knowledgeable? What do those words mean? Most? I don't get your words.
We describe God as knowledgeable.
Knowledgeable. Like omniscient, you mean? Omniscient is the word you want, right? Yeah. He's all-knowing, okay. If I describe God that way, then what?
Then we create sort of two categories. There's a category of being knowledge, and there's God, and God's within that category. I don't understand what this means.
One second. All right. I mean, when you describe anything, when you say that an object has a quality, you have a quality. In theory, the quality could be possessed by many things. Maybe not. Maybe in particular cases not. But the qualities are the kinds of things that apply to objects. And you're saying this object has this quality. If you want to speak of the quality as creating a category of things that have the quality, that's innocent. I don't see any harm in doing that. I don't see anything particularly insightful or useful doing it, but let's say you do that. Now you have a category, and now you have God in the category. Now what's supposed to happen now?
Apparently that was problematic. So I was wondering why.
If you have some independent reason to think that you don't want to say God has attributes, that independent reason will also cancel out his being in one of the categories that is determined by the attribute. But if you're trying to say that this is a good reason to deny attributes, because if there are attributes, there are categories. And if there are categories and God's in a category, that's a problem, and that's why there aren't attributes. I don't see it. I just don't see it. When we speak about God being good or God's being just and so forth and so on, those words create categories and would mean God is in the category. I don't see that in and of itself as being a problem that could motivate you to draw other conclusions. But maybe there are. Maybe there's something. I never heard of it. The question discussed in terms of there being a category. God's being in the category. That's a problem. I've never heard it.
I'll try to find the source.
Yeah, I would like to see it. Yeah. Yeah.
So, Shlomo Hamelech's concern with the mitzvah of the Red Heifer, we've been going over that in Chumash, and we see ways to make it make sense. Okay, why do the people who are helping prepare it become tameh? Well, they're dealing with the cow, which is like an embodiment of like vital rebellious life, and in interacting with that, they're going to contaminate themselves, but then through burning that down, they'll create the rejection of that, and then that'll help people deal with death, and death is a punishment for rebellion, and death came into the
Okay.
world. But so I'm asking, what is it that Shlomo's seeing that I'm not seeing, which is almost like I can't possibly comprehend?
Yeah, this is a good subject. If we have a midrash here, otherwise I'll tell it to you about. Do we have a midrash Rabbi here?
Possibly, but not.
This is really worth doing inside. If we had, actually, I probably have no,
Maybe
but
upstairs on the library.
none of the. Here you have just Gemaras.
Tomorrow.
What's this over here?
Sorry?
That's Nach.
Midrash.
Midrash Rabbah.
I'll be right back.
Yeah.
I think we
Yeah,
have like
the-
a midrash upstairs.
Okay, this is worth teaching you. This is
Might be over there.
That's a good question.
yeah.
You said there's an objective purpose in life, which is pleasing God. That's what you discussed this
Yeah.
previously, from our perspective.
Mhm.
So presumably that then means there's an objective meaning in life for working towards the purpose.
Absolutely.
So why would pleasing God be meaningful in and of itself?
I don't know if this is the one, but
There is a problem with why questions, because if I tell you why, you ask me why that's meaningful. Well, but then you have to acknowledge that at a certain point, why questions run out.
No, because
Otherwise, why questions are meaningless to start with.
no, because from a, if you say loyalishmal point of view, then it's understandable. You can understand because God would
Oh, okay. So I mean,
from the lishmal perspective, doesn't.
he is serving God is the only way to link with that which is real. Everything else is illusion. That's one way to look at it. Listen, in Midrash Rabbah, I hope this has got. Oh, I think this is. 1 second.
We might have it.
This is gracious. We need Bamidbar. I'm sorry. We're in Bamidbar now. It's this week's parsha, right? That's why you're doing it.
Should just build spirit.
maybe it's in a Chumash or something.
Okay, I'll do it. I have it on my phone. This is a tiny bit sliver of gracious. It must be a very multiple issue thing. Okay, I'll get it here. I have it here. You sewed. I hope I have reception down here. Come on. I do have reception. Why isn't it working? second.
Does this?
What's that? Let's see. No, this is not midrash. This is mem hey meforshim. This is bikus gadolos. I can't get. Maybe that we don't have what they call. Oh, here we go. Okay, Tanakh, Mishnah Yesod, Sheva. Let's see this. Midrashim. Okay, Midrash Rabbah. Bamidbar. Chukas. Okay, here we are. Now, let me explain to you what the real problem is here. Your problem is okay. You know why? The problem that's supposed to be is that the very same item is metame tehorim, metar tmeim. It purifies the defiled and it defiles the pure. How can the same item do that? So you're thinking of ways because of this part of the procedure, that part of the procedure. That's a legitimate way to think about it. But I think the problem is even worse. Is it really paradoxical that one thing should have opposite effects on different things? Take medicine. There are medicines which cure people who have illness and will make healthy people ill. That's a fact. Is that some kind of terrible logical paradox? That's a mystery. Let's say multiplying numbers by -1. If the number is plus, it becomes minus. If the number is minus, it becomes plus. Multiplying by -1 changes the sign of the number. That's not a paradox. Nobody's worried about that. So why would the fact that one thing can make the Tomei Tohar and make the Tohar Tomei be some kind of deep logical paradox? Now, if you read the Midrash from which this comes, I think you will see right in the words that's a wrong way to describe the problem. The problem is not being described correctly at all. What I'm telling you now is my pshat, so it could be dead wrong, but I'm quite convinced that it's dead right. The Midrash starts with a verse from the book of Job. Mi yitein tahor mitamei lo echad literally means, who shall bring out from the defiled something which is pure? Is it not the one of the universe? The Creator? Who can bring out from the defiled, from the tamei, something which is pure? Your natural thought is, if the source is defiled, what you bring out of it is also going to be defiled. We have a rule in halacha, yotzim min tamei tamei. So the secretion of a wasp or the secretion of a cow, of a horse, is going to be tamei because the wasp and the cow and the horse are tamei. So the verse in Eov says in wonderment, who shall bring out from the defiled something that is pure? And it answers, who shall do that? Is it not Echad, the one of the universe, meaning the Creator? Isn't that what he does? Doesn't he do that all the time? Doesn't he take out from the Tamei something that's Tohar? And now he gives examples. Like Abraham from Terach. Abraham's father was an idol worshiper. And Abraham came out serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Chizkiyahu mi'achad, Yoshiyahu mi'amon, Mordechai mi'shimi, Yisrael mi'avdei kochavim, all these people and the Jewish people from a population of human beings who were all idol worshippers. The world to come from this world, the world to come is made out of, comes out of, is developed from this world. Now it says, Mi asa kain, mi tziva kain, mi gaza kain. Who did this? Who commanded this? Who decreed this? Lo yichido shalom, is it not the one of the world? These things which seem counterintuitive, is it not the one of the world who does this? Meaning, yes, guess what? He does what he does. That's the statement. That's what he does. This is not a statement of a paradox. It's a statement of fact. This is the kind of thing that God does. He takes something that's disqualified and draws out of it something that's qualified. He takes something that's defiled and takes out of it something that's pure. That's the first paragraph. Now it goes on again, same thing. Tamar Tahinin, in the laws of Saras. Beheres kigris ba'adam tamei. The certain type of whiteness color, the size of a gris, which is a very small volume, on the skin of a person, makes him tamei. Porcha b'kulo tohor. If it covers his entire skin, his entire body, he's tohor. Do you hear that? This size makes you tamei and covers the entire skin as tohor. Would you expect that? Would you believe that? Would you think that that was a normal, natural thing to happen? So the Medrash says exactly the same words. There are other examples. A pregnant woman whose fetus dies within her. Now, the midwife puts her hand inside and touches the dead fetus. She becomes tummy from touching the dead fetus. But the pregnant woman herself, who surrounds the whole fetus with her body, she's touching the whole thing simultaneously. She's not tummy. She's not tummy. Touching with the finger makes you tummy, but the whole surrounding womb doesn't make her tummy. And the Midrash then says the very same words as above. Mi asakain, mi tzivakain, mi dozakain. Who did this? Who commanded this? Who decreed this? Lo yichodev shalom. Is it not the one of the world who does all these things? Okay. A third example, third paragraph. It says over there, those who are occupied with producing the paraduma, the red heifer, from the beginning to the end, they become tamei through doing that. The paraduma prepared in the appropriate way purifies the person and the begotten. Now, that also sounds paradoxical. The Midrash doesn't follow the formula anymore. Doesn't say the formula anymore. Doesn't bring the verse from Eov. Doesn't say who commanded it, who decreed it, who did it. Doesn't say that. There's a entirely different vocabulary now. It says, Amar Kodesh Baruch Hu, Chuka chakakti, Gezer gazarti, because Baruch Hu said, I have legislated a law, I have made a decree, you are not allowed to violate my decree. So anyone with a literary sense says, what's going on here? You have two paragraphs with identical structure. Each one sets up certain types of examples. It starts with a verse from Job, who extracts pure things from impure sources. Is it not the one of the world? You have examples of things where you have a bad source and a good continuation, or you have a little thing which makes things bad and blow it up into a gigantic thing. It's okay or it's good, and it says in each case it says who commanded, who did it, who commanded it, who decreed it. Is it not the one of the world? Meaning it is the one of the world, and this is what he does. You have that twice. Then you have the one in question, the paraduma defiles the pure and purifies the defiled, and it says, God says, I made a law, don't violate my law. So isn't it obvious that the first two paragraphs, which use the verse from Job and talk about God doing this counterintuitive thing where the source is bad and the product is good, or a little bit is bad and a lot more is good, these things are where we say, God does that. Period. Accept it. That's how he runs the world. And then you come to the paraduma, which has opposite effects. That's supposed to be a puzzle because of the two preceding paragraphs. Not because of abstract logic, one thing can't have opposite effects on other things. Baloney, of course they do. That's not paradoxical at all. It's a paradox because of the two preceding paragraphs. What do the two preceding paragraphs teach us? That God is overwhelmingly biased on the side of the pure. Overwhelmingly biased on the side of the good. Overwhelmingly biased on the side of the ideal. So much so that he promotes the good and the pure and the ideal in circumstances that are almost inconceivably against it, and he does it. The Creator does it. He pushes the good and the pure and the ideal into existence in very counterintuitive circumstances. Okay, that's his policy. His policy is overwhelmingly biased on the side of the pure and the good and the ideal. Now, here you have the paraduma. The paraduma is designed to overcome the worst type of tumah, the worst type of spiritual disqualification. That's what it's designed to do. And it disqualifies, it pollutes. How could that be in terms of God's running of the world? Not medicine and not mathematics and not logic, but how God runs the world. He runs the world overwhelmingly biased on the side of the pure, and he takes an element which is the strongest purifier and says, oh, by the way, that disqualifies you and pollutes you also. It's a paradox in his way of running the world. That's the problem the Chazal are talking about. They're not talking about logic, they're not talking about mathematics, they're not talking about medicine. They're talking about something which is a paradox in the way God runs the world. That's what the words say. The words say that without, I don't think I'm putting any interpretation onto it or commentary on it. That's what the words say. Yeah.
What kind of tamei status do people who handle the paraduma get during the process? Do they get tamei as well?
Do they get what? Sorry.
What level of tamei?
Well, it's its own category. There, it is matami them and their clothes, and it lasts till evening.
But it goes away.
All tumah goes away.
No,
all tumah can go away.
No, I think it goes away by itself, just by.
Well, no, all tumah has to be terminated by going to mikveh. You don't go to mikveh; it's not terminated. Some types of tumah require going to the mikveh and other things as well.
And then tamei requires mikveh
and the sprinkling of the paraduma, the ashes of the paraduma in the water. But that's what now you see that what you were thinking about, what I objected before, not relevant to the point of Chazal. This is one of the few things where I think I really understand what Chazal is saying. Yeah.
What is the rationale behind God putting in these systems of purity and impurity in the world? What Lamase, what does it do for us?
Well, on a metaphysical level, there are many things that are going on that I really can't describe to you. But my first wife had, I think, a very deep insight here. She defined Tumah as mini kares. What does kares mean? Isn't that sharp? Isn't that really sharp? She said that kares means being cut off from Kadosh Baruch Hu. Tumah cuts you off from different types of kedusha, things that are holy. Certain types of tumah you can't go into the Beis Hamikdash. You can't eat truma. You can't eat kodshim. So being cut off from things that are holy is like being cut off from the things that represent the Kodesh Baruch Hu in the world. Many of them, not all of them, but many of them, and therefore it has some of the conditions of kares. So it means that it's a condition where something has happened to require a temporary disconnection from holy things, some holy things, which means a temporary distancing from a Kodesh Baruch Hu, which then has to be overcome and recovered.
And what purpose does it serve? Why does doing certain things? Why does Hashem want us to be disconnected from Him for a short period of time after doing certain things?
Well, there are at least 25 different types of tumah, and each would have its own reason. But I'll give you an example which I do know from Rav Hirsch. Let's see now. Let's see. How widely does he apply this? I know he links tumah with death. Now, not only death creates tumah, but dead people create tumah. Dead animals create tumah. And
fit into that category? Sorry.
and when a woman has a menstrual period, we know that she's lost an egg, which was a potential for life. A man's seminal emission also, the semen that carries the sperm, which is a potential for life. And the one which I think is the most original one is what happens with birth. And there the idea is that she has two lives in her own life and the life of the fetus. And with birth, she loses that life. It doesn't die, but she loses it. Now, Church says the essence of a human being is to be active. Free will is part of a person's essence to act in the world. Death is the cessation of action. So death is the ultimate defeat. Rabbi Soloveitchik used to speak about this all the time. Psukim in Tehillim, verses of Psalms, that death is the ultimate defeat because it's the end of all activity. So when you have a brush with death, that puts you in a situation where your attachment to life is affected. It's not as intense and pure as it was before. And what you need to do is take a step back, and then you go through a process of rebirth. And that's what mikveh is. Mikveh is emerging out of water.
Ideally, one should have kavanah for this.
Yes, that's right. You're right. Ideally, one should have kavanah for this.
Really, to understand it properly, the kavanah really,
As I said, this is not the only type of tumah, but this type of tumah, Rav Hirsch has a real deep explanation of. And there's endless literature on these things, so you can look up literature. But it's the right kind of question to ask. I think my first wife's definitions really, it captures what the significance of the effect is it being cut off from certain contact with Kedusha. Yeah.
So, I've been trying to wrap my head around beauty.
About what?
Around beauty.
Beauty.
So I was thinking that like awe might be a useful parallel, because we talk a lot more about awe, and I have some vague understanding there. So awe is something like, at the point where my understanding of a force ends, I have something like an internal emotional or sensational reaction, whatever, or maybe a state of mind related to that which I can't understand, but I have a sense of the implications it has for my life, which are, like, in the case of Hashem, infinite. And so it's that internal reaction to something you can't really comprehend. It takes off maybe after understanding, although I'm not saying that they're opposed, because they can enhance each other. But I wonder if beauty is a kind of reaction to, like, profound order that you can't really understand when you're looking at it. So when you look at, someone's perfectly symmetrical face, you're not thinking to yourself that it's perfectly symmetrical, but you're reacting to, like, the high amount of order in them with that reaction of beauty. So is that along the right track, or is there a better way to think about it?
I think it's a track worth going down, but there are a few things there that I think would be good to organize. The words you said about awe are true, but they're too general because they'll include cases which you don't mean to include. And say, I have a book. The first 32 chapters are in English. The last 4 chapters are in Chinese. That's where my understanding stops. It stops at the end of chapter 32. 4, 5, and 6, 7 are like, over the page. I'm not in awe of the last 4 chapters because they're in Chinese, even though I don't understand them. So not understanding isn't enough for it to be awe. Awe requires some lack of understanding, I agree, but just being something you don't understand isn't enough to mean that what your attitude is an attitude of awe. There has to be a root you do understand and then more that you don't understand. For example, you see an awesome athletic performance, right? You know what he did. You just can't imagine how he did it. How could anyone do that? I learn Torah every day. We have several chavrusas. We are always in awe of the authors of these books. They're off the page, I taught university, and I was around people who are considered to be very smart. No siree, there's no comparison. It's like comparing Einstein with a pebble. It's just, there's no point of contact. Now, I know what it is to be smart. I know what it is to know things. I just can't imagine being that smart and knowing all of that, right? So it's in a dimension that I do understand, to a degree that I can't imagine how such a thing is achieved. So it can't be just a blank like Chinese. There has to be something which is, you appreciate its greatness, and partly because you can't imagine how that greatness was achieved, it awes you because you know that you haven't got the resources to do it. So it awes you. But it's greatness, and you understand the kind of greatness that it was. Otherwise, it wouldn't be awe, it would just be mysterious. As far as beauty is concerned, nobody understands beauty. What's worse than a question with no answer? A question with 6 answers. And as many books on beauty as there are people who think about it, and they all disagree with one another, so nobody really understands it. But in our literature, people are described as beautiful. Yerushalayim is described as beautiful. So I heard this from Rabbi Moshe Shapiro, Zechron Livracha. There's a verse that we say in Eishes Chayil, the commentary of the Gra. Sheker achein v'hevel yofi, isha yiras Hashem hitis halo. Charm is false, and beauty is empty and meaningless. A woman who fears or has awe for Hashem, she shall be praised. Says the Gra, the two parts of the verse are contrasting one another. A woman who doesn't have awe for Hashem, such a woman, her charm and her beauty are false and empty. But a woman who does have awe for Hashem, her charm and her beauty are positive. They're not negative. It's not charm and beauty that are rejected. It's charm and beauty on an unworthy subject. The message then is that the function of beauty is to express an inner reality, a particular inner reality. If the inner reality isn't there, then the external is like someone who's in town square yelling a message into the crowd, which is false. Tomorrow the king is coming, but he isn't, right? That's gross. He's promoting falsehood by announcing it in public. Of course, dissemination of information is very important, and people who can bring information to crowds is very important. But not when it's false. So real beauty is the kind of external which, again, I'm not defining it now, but it's a kind of external which captures your attention and puts you in the presence, makes you the feeling that you're in the presence of something that's very valuable. Then, if it's just a veneer on something that's unworthy, then it's false and empty. The pasuk doesn't say it's not really charm, it's not really beauty. It doesn't say that. It says the charm and the beauty under those conditions is false and empty. And a woman who's full of the awe of Hashem, which is what the woman's essential character should be in spiritual terms, then the external expression of her inner worth is appropriate. And that's why great people have their beauty praised in our verses. I'm not going to say that Esther was unworthy because she was beauty and she was publicizing and promoting something that's worthless. No, in her case it wasn't worthless. In her case it was very valuable. That's a little bit of something to think about in terms of beauty. Yeah. Okay.
Need one concern themselves with potentially focusing less on their own avoda to engage more with other people and the world around them?
You're asking the question in a specific way. Let me back off in a specific way and just validate the consideration that you're making. There are times when you have to let go of your own avoda in order to be able to help other people. That's definitely true. That's definitely true. That's how she put it. That's a true way of saying something. But maybe a truer way would be to say, your real avoda, your real service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu at that moment is to attend to the other person's needs instead of attending to your own needs. So it's not as if you're not doing avoda, you're doing a different avoda. And instead of the avoda being focused on elevating yourself in isolation, it's focused on helping the other person. Both are service of God. In fact, the Maharal talks about 3 areas of service: service directed to God, service directed to other people, and service directed to elevating yourself. They're all service of God. But isn't it you put God's service on vacation and say, God, wait till next week, meantime I'm doing something else. It's a question of what the object of the service is, what you're operating on. All of it is service. There's no time off from serving God. But there is a serious question about when you sacrifice the service meant to elevate you for the service meant to elevate other people. And I don't think there's a simple, easy formula for knowing this. You have to ask people who know the Torah, who know people, and have experience, what would be the best thing for a particular person to do. The example that I give when I'm trying to encourage people to stay in yeshiva is, let's suppose you're a third-year medical student, medical school, and there's a plague. People are dying in the streets. Well, you're a third-year medical student. You haven't got an MD, but you have 2.5 years of medical experience, and you certainly could help people. So should you quit medical school and go out to help them? Maybe yes, but maybe no, because 25 years from now there's going to be another plague. If you stay in medical school, then you'll be a doctor instead of someone who quit medical school. And then you'll be able to do much, much more for the people who are dying in the streets. So maybe you sacrifice the aid that you could give to others at the moment for further training, which means that for the rest of your life you can give a much higher level of aid. There was an idea in some places that the Jewish people is losing so many people and the house is burning. If you get a poor person who became religious, hold them in yeshiva for 6 months and give them a budget, and let them go out and bring more people in. Others said no. They said as long as he can stay in yeshiva, let him stay in yeshiva. 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, when he finally goes out, for the rest of his life, he'll have a much bigger impact. Much bigger impact. He was investing in the long-term, large-scale impact that he can have in the world. So it's a delicate equation. I'm not saying one's right, one's wrong. It's a delicate equation, and it needs careful consideration. It could even be that different people have different things to contribute, and some will do it one way, some will do it the other way. I'm not being doctrinaire in this issue at all, but it's a very, very serious issue. I'll just give you one example of this. When God resolves to tell Abraham about the city of Sodom and Gomorrah, that he's going to destroy them, he starts off, Avraham Asher ani oseh. Says, shall I hide from Abraham what I'm going to do? And then he says, no, because he has a whole community, and he commands them to follow my way. I'm not going to hide it from him. So what was the question and what was the answer? Well, I think it's the Chasam Sofer, or one of the people in school, who said like the following. Prophecy requires a certain inner elevation, which is usually achieved through private meditation. Spending time alone and elevating your inner focus, your inner understanding. Abraham didn't have that. So maybe I should hide it from him. Maybe he's not the right receptacle to tell it to. And then the Kodesh Baruch Hu says, no. You know why he doesn't have the inner elevation? Because he's heading a whole community. And he's teaching this whole community how to serve me. He shouldn't lose out because of that. So Rav Mendel Weinbach used to tell us, you see from this Chasam Sofer, that if you lose your inner working on yourself in order to be able to help others in this way, you're not going to lose out. Kodesh Baruch Hu will not penalize you for that. Even though you don't have the appropriate preparation, Kodesh Baruch Hu will give it to you anyway. That's one idea in one context, and others could have different nuances. Again, I'm not being doctrinaire, but there is something to be said here, where the balance is between, I'll give you one other example. Reuven has the ability to go into business and earn millions of dollars and support whole yeshivas. Whole yeshivas. Only thing is, the business that he's going to go into requires 12 hours a day. 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. And he'll have millions of dollars. One result of which will be he can't learn. But he'll pay for hundreds of people's learning. Isn't that something worthwhile? Very worthwhile. Does it relieve him of the responsibility of learning? Typically not. There won't be millions of dollars. You're not running the taksiv. You're not running the economy. God is. If he wants there to be millions of dollars, there'll be. If he doesn't want there to be, it won't be. You have a mitzvah of learning Torah. And the fact that you're sacrificing millions of dollars, it may be the wrong thing to consider. There's a case where people will say, a certain amount of learning you must do because otherwise you're not functioning as a Jew. And the hundreds that you could have supported won't be there. They'll be there if God wants them there. They'll bring them there through somebody else. If it's going to cost you a life of no learning, that's not right. There's too much to pay. So it's a very delicate issue.
Years ago, you laid out to me one of the problems that emerge with free will, which is that either it behaves according to rules or it behaves according to chance or some combination of the two. There was a sense that we have an intuition that it doesn't work like that wouldn't be satisfying if it worked like that. Have you found anything in the meantime that might point to something more akin to our intuition of what's going on? And the last thing I'll just throw in there is when we're looking at the Chumash sometimes, when Yosef was saying no to the tempting, there's that musical note which plays, which implies something like extreme strain of resistance and like exercise of free will. I think it shows up a few other times elsewhere, but...
You remember that also, but you don't realize you're remembering it. I'm going to talk about it in the free will share. This unsolved problem. I don't know how you say how many years ago. I don't remember what I said then, but the problem of rules versus external causation. There are two philosophers who have a way of dealing with the problem: John Searle and Timothy O'Connor. Like everything else in free will, they're a tiny minority. I mean, because everybody has his own confusions and difficulties to deal with. But I'll just end with what you asked at the end, because I'm going to talk about this in the shir in detail, which is talking about the shalshelis. And the shalshelis occurs in the Torah 4 times. And in 3 of them, it is clear that it expresses inner conflict. Inner conflict, inner struggle. One is where the angels say to Lot, "Get out of Sodom, we're going to destroy it." And he can't do it. He can't detach himself. He's hesitating. He's on the brink, fall this side, fall that side, which way shall I go? They grab his hands, they drag him out. Another one is Vayomar, where Eliezer is at the well, and he's supposed to find a wife for Yitzchak. Who am I to find a wife for Yitzchak? I can't do this. I can't manage this. Kodesh Baruch Hu, you have to help me. So he asks for help. But he asks for help in the mode of asking for a sign. Asking for a sign, according to the Torah, is very tricky. Sometimes it's absolutely forbidden. And in fact, there's this dispute in the Gemara whether what he did was right or wrong. He knows he's on a knife edge, and he's asking. He doesn't want to ask it the wrong way, and it's Vayomar. And he said, but it's drawn out in the Shalshelis way. And the third one is when the wife of Potiphar tries to seduce Joseph and finds him alone at home and grabs his garment and says, Vaysarev, he rejects it, and he's also struggling there. Some say he had already caved in and needed divine help to save him. He was also struggling there. Those are the 3, and they all do connote inner turmoil. There's one more, and that's where Parashas, I think it's Tzav, where it says that Moses is inaugurating his older brother and his children as the Kohanim, and the last sacrifice the last sacrifice that he makes as pseudo Kohen Gadol, which he was for 7 days, the last one he offers, the word vayishchat, the slaughtering, has that shalshelis. But I said on my own, he should have had this. He should have been the Kohen Gadol. He lost it because of the burning bush. He pushed too hard against God. Yichar Hashem and Moshe. And he lost the kahuna. He's got to be thinking, this should have been me. What I'm putting my brother into should have been me. And he's giving it over. I thought that on my own, so I used to teach it and say, I don't know, is it true? Is it not true? That's the way it seems to be. But then I found the Balaturim, which isn't in all the additions to the Balaturim, so if you look it up, you don't find it, look on another Balaturim. And Parshas Tetzaveh, where Moshe Rabbeinu's name doesn't appear, and they ask why is it that Moshe Rabbeinu's in the whole Parshas name doesn't appear. He gives two reasons. The one reason everybody knows, he said, blot me out of your book, so he blotted out of the Parsha. Okay, we could say a whole thing about that. There's a second reason, which nobody quotes, where the Baal Turim says, this is the instructions of how he should inaugurate his brother as Kohen Gadol, and if his name was there, it would cause him pain. Ogbas nefesh. Pain to be receiving the instructions to put his brother in as Kohen Gadol. I thought to myself, yeah, so I was right. I was right. It was painful to him, and I think it was painful to the end of his life, because when God says to Moses, you're going to die, go up the mountain, you're going to die, as your brother died. And the Chazal say, you see, he wished to die the way his brother died. Part of his brother dying is that he went up with Elazar, his grandson, and son, and he took off his high priest clothes and put them on his son. He saw his son stepping into his position after him, carrying on after him. Moses didn't see that. His sons were very questionable. And he certainly didn't carry on after him. Had he been Kohen Gadol, had he been the high priest, he would have seen his son stepping in after him to be carrying it on. So I think this bothered him till the end of his life. But that's what that shalshelis is. So that's what the shalshelis connotes, that's right. There's only four, and it's always inner turmoil about what you're doing, and inner resistance and overcoming the resistance. Okay.